I'm Eric. Thank you for coming. I'll be presenting our work, security analysis of the message layer security key derivation. This was joint work with Chris Brzuska, Konrad, Kohbrok, and myself at Aalto University in Finland. So the message layer security protocol is a IETF standard that's upcoming, that's intended for secure group communication. So the goals of MLS, to understand them, I will give some definitions in the beginning, starting with key derivation. So a key derivation, as I'm sure you all know, is a protocol that aims to provide two parties with a shared key by exchanging a couple of messages. Typically, we want some security properties from a key exchange protocol. The first is typically named key indistinguishability. Key indistinguishability says that an outside observer looking at the communication between Alice and Bob here would gain no information on the key that Alice and Bob agree on. A second property is entity identification. This requires that Alice and Bob get some guarantees on the party they're communicating with to ensure they're not communicating with someone else or there's not someone in the middle. Then there's a more recent security property of key exchange, which is called forward secrecy. In forward secrecy, the scenario is that Alice and Bob started the communication in the past, they did the key exchange, they used the keys for a while, and then the communication ends, so they throw away their keys. But in the future, either Alice or Bob's state is leaked, potentially including the long-term keys such as signing keys, and this leakage should not negatively affect the security of the original key exchange. Moving on, we have a functional requirement on key exchange called continuous key exchange. In this setting, the sessions are longer, and therefore Alice and Bob want to continuously update their keys to hopefully get better security guarantees. And in specifically, what they want is post-compromise security. In post-compromise security, the setting is such that Alice and Bob start the communication. They start exchanging messages. However, either Alice or Bob's state is leaked, including the keys that were exchanged in the key exchange. At this point, the attacker goes offline, so he's not actively corrupting the party he's corrupting, but he can still see the messages being sent. So if Alice and Bob manage to do an update while the adversary is inactive, the requirement is that the key that comes out of this update is secure again and provides proper security guarantees on the messages. Next is another functional requirement for key exchange called asynchronous key exchange. In this setting, Alice and Bob cannot be expected to be online at the same time, so they need to communicate through a third party or whatever. In this case, it's represented by a server. So to initiate the key exchange, Alice would send a message to this server. The later point in time, Bob comes online, receives a message, responds with his side of the key exchange, and this process continues until the key exchange finished. The key challenges here being this requirement of a untrusted third party that needs to handle the messages, and the fact that Alice and Bob are never online at the same time, or at least cannot be expected to be. And then a last functional requirement for understanding MLS is group key exchange. In this setting, there are simply more than two parties, and on top of that, there's a potential for changes to the group membership. So maybe they want to add someone to the group, and then the requirement for the person being added is that they would not have any knowledge of keys prior to them joining the group. And similarly, they might want to remove someone from the group, the requirement being that the removed person no longer has access to keys going forward. And that gives you an idea of what MLS aims to be. So MLS aims to be a continuous asynchronous group key exchange protocol that provides proper security guarantees as seen on the slide, and is also efficient at doing so. So how does MLS does this? At the core, MLS has something that's called TreeCam. TreeCam was originally described in a paper as a proposal for MLS and was adopted in one of the early draft versions. It should be noted that over several drafts of MLS, the specifics of TreeCam have changed, so the paper version might be different from what's in the draft now. So what is TreeCam? As the name suggests, it's a tree structure where the nodes are chems or key encryption methods. In particular, the leaf nodes of this tree are associated with the group members in the tree, where the association means that only that group member has access to the secret of the private key of that node. For the other nodes in the tree, a similar property holds, in particular if a member of the group is in the subtree of a particular node in the tree, then they would know the secret key of that node. In this diagram, we're looking at TreeCam from the perspective of member H in the tree, and we can see this because there are some additional values there. These additional values are used by the group members to make updates to the key material in TreeCam. For the leaf node of H, this would be a value that H randomly generates on their machine. And for the rest of the nodes on the path from H's leaf to the root, this is derived in accordance with the derived node box here, which tells you that the secret value associated with a particular node is derived from the child node, and the public-private key pair associated with a node is derived with the secret value of that node's value as a seed for the key generation algorithm. So this derivation is carried out from the leaf to the root, and at this point, H knows what these new values are, but the rest of the group doesn't yet. So in order to share this information with the rest of the group, H will chem this to the other members of the group, basically just using the public key of some other node to encrypt this secret value of a node, so that the other members may use it to derive the corresponding values. In particular, for this tree, this diagram shows you to which nodes the secrets will be encrypted, and as a result of this sharing, the entire group will agree on the value at. As a result of this, the entire group will agree on the value that's at the root of the tree, because they all know at least one value within the tree. By itself, TreeCam provides rather weak security properties, in particular with respect to forward secrecy and post-compromise security. Therefore, MLS employs what's called a key schedule on top of TreeCam. So in the key schedule, the value from the tree is combined with what's called what we call the internal secret. This is a value that the group shares from prior iterations of the protocol. And these two values are fed into a key derivation function to combine their entropy. And actually, so this is how it was in the spec as when we analyzed it, and we made a proposal for a change of including a context value in this derivation in order to provide some domain separation guarantees on the output of the key derivation. We made a proposal for this change on GitHub, and it has since been adopted in the draft after the version we analyzed in this paper. The value coming out of the first key derivation function is then combined with what we call an external secret. This is simply a value that the group can agree upon out of bounds. If they do not agree on a value out of bounds, they just use a standard string that's defined in the spec. And this double key derivation hence this double key derivation is used to combine these three secrets, and from which they derive various keys that are used in MLS for encryption and whatnot. In particular, you can see that there is also an s prime int output, so this would be used in the next iteration of the protocol on the left side of the diagram. Putting the two together, so TreeCam and the key schedule, we get the MLS key derivation from the title of our paper. So this is what MLS uses to use the key shares that are exchanged by the key exchange to obtain the keys that are used ultimately for encryption. So from there, one of the main outcomes of our paper is this honesty graph. We define honesty as the property of a key being either known to the attacker or not. So an honest key is a key that is not known to the attacker. And this honesty graph will tell you for each key in the key derivation whether the attacker knows it or not, based on the honesty property of the key from which it's generated. So for the TreeCam part of the key derivation, we can see that honesty is maintained based on derivations as as seen from the ID nodes, which stands for identity. Note here that even though there's 2 inputs into the node, the honesty value of the derived value comes only from 1. This is due to the nature of how MLS is supposed to work, as we saw earlier in the presentation. In the key schedule, we can see that in the location where there used to be key derivation functions, there's now a node with an OR symbol. This is used to signify that the output of this derivation is honest if either of the input values is honest. So how do we get to this honesty graph? It's through our security proof. In the presentation, I will only give a high-level overview of the security proof. Please read the paper if you want to know the details. So for our security proof, we need 3 cryptographic assumptions. The first is the existence of pseudo-random functions that are secure and collision resistant. The second is the existence of dual pseudo-random functions that are secure and collision resistant. So a dual pseudo-random function is a function that ties back to this KDF property that I said earlier, that it needs to accept 2 inputs and provide secure outputs if either of the inputs is honest. And the last assumption is on public key encryption. So our proof on a high level consists of 3 steps. In the first step, we provide a security proof for a TRICAM based on our PRF and public key encryption assumptions. We do this starting from the leaf nodes, where again, values are randomly sampled on the user's device, and using a hybrid argument over the layers of the tree, we show that the derivations and encryptions do not negatively affect the security of the keys being derived. In the second step of the proof, we turn our attention to the key schedule. Here we use the assumptions, all of our assumptions, to show that the derivations being carried out, in addition with the iterative use of the internal secret, provide proper security guarantees. And here we use a hybrid argument over the continuous nature of the key schedule. And in the last step, we just combine these 2 results to show that the overall key derivation provides the security guarantees that we can see in the honesty graph. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks a lot, Eric. And we have time for a few questions on MLS. Okay, then question from my side. MLS is in the draft stage. So what do you expect? When will we end up at a phase where it's really standardized and then also applications start to be used in practice?
Yes, so to my knowledge, at the moment, the working group is focusing on ironing out no longer any technical details, just the descriptions and clarifying anything that's unclear to people that are already trying to implement the protocol. I cannot give an exact date as I'm not that involved, but I believe it will be this year or early next year.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, this is Lingren from University of Illinois. Can you tell us more about the motivation or justification for the model of post-compromise security?
In general, or for
in general, yeah.
Yeah. So the motivation is mainly related to the fact that, as I said, sessions are becoming longer and longer. Traditionally, I don't know, if you do a phone call, like that takes 10 minutes, probably at most, whereas nowadays you have a phone with WhatsApp or Telegram or WeChat or whatever, and probably the session is as old as your phone. So if you don't update your keys, like if at any point the attacker gains access to your phone, it gets access to your whole chat history. Whereas if you perform these updates, they only have a limited window of messages that they can obtain.
Okay, but so why is it reasonable to assume that the attacker, once stolen the key, cannot impersonate?
I'm sorry. That's a good question. I'm not too up to date on I don't remember well enough to answer the question. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm sure, are there online questions? No, if not, then let's thank Eric once again.